WisconsinEye is partnering with the Wisconsin Counties Association for a discussion on demographics, counties, and Wisconsin's future, including the question, how sustainable is a property tax? Mark O'Connell, Executive Director of the Wisconsin Counties Association. Thanks for coming in for this discussion.
Great to be in Wisconsin.
Glad you're broadcasting on your Facebook page.
Great to be on Facebook. I check Facebook religiously, but once every 6 months or so. But I know a lot of other folks check it all the time, and it's great. It's a great medium for communication and exchange of ideas.
I think we need to start at looking at Wisconsin's workforce, demographic changes. Mm-hmm. Now, I know, getting ready for this, you've done a study of this, and we have a graphic showing how it's changed. What does it prove? Big changes over the last few decades, and where's it going?
Yeah, this is interesting. I mean, Wisconsin is not unlike any other state in the country for the most part. I mean, we're getting old very quickly. I mean, we're going to move from 13% of our population over age 65 to very quickly in the next 10, 12, 15 years to well over 25% over the age of 65. And that's assuming that we have no medical advances which are going to extend people's lives. The likelihood we're going to have a medical advance that extends someone's life longer than the current mortality tables tell us is very high. So 25%, that is really, I think, very conservative. I think it's probably going to be much higher than that. So we're getting old really quick. And the sad part is, we knew this was coming. I mean, you and I were born, 55, 60, 65 years ago.
Boomers.
We knew we were going to be here a long time, yet we didn't prepare for it. I mean, maybe the best example is Social Security. I mean, we started Social Security at 45 people giving in for every one person taking out. We're fast approaching a time where 2 people will be giving in for every 1 taking out, and that's not sustainable because the numbers just don't work. Same thing here in Wisconsin. We knew we were going to be here, yet we didn't plan for it. Now we talk at the federal level. There's a lot of conversation about we're going to address Social Security, we're going to means test it, we're going to increase the age of eligibility, we're going to expand the dollar amount in which the tax is applied. And if you did those 3 things, you actually have a sustainable system for a long time.
It wouldn't go bankrupt by 2036 or something.
Well, let's say 2036 is the magic date. When do we think in this country, given our history, we're going to start seriously talking about fixing Social Security if we think it's going to run out in 2036? Probably about 2035. Yet we know it's a problem today. Same thing in Wisconsin. We know we have a demographic challenge in this state. We know we have townships in northern Wisconsin where the average age is over age 55. We know this. We know that if you want to keep young people in an area, you need to provide them things that make life attractive to them. We know this. So if we know these things, why would we not engage in activities which put our state in a position for future success? It's pretty clear.
Which regions of Wisconsin are most at risk is the wrong term, but have the oldest residents?
Well, northern Wisconsin is aging quickly. We have, and our rural areas for the most part are aging quickly. But when you look at the maps of where economic activity is occurring, it's occurring along the major transportation routes. It's occurring along the interstates or just off the interstates, close by. That is where the economic activity is occurring. Green Bay, Fox Valley, Madison, Milwaukee area, and then up north a little bit to, let's say, Point and Wausau on 39, and then over toward the Twin Cities. But you get outside of those areas, we have very difficult economic challenges there. And so you can't say it's in one particular area. What you can say in our you might call it a tale of 2 states within one state. You can say urban / close to major transportation routes versus everywhere else. That's sort of the tale of 2 states that we have going on.
What about job growth statewide? And where is it occurring? Because you and I hear in this election year that our unemployment rate is 2.8, 2.9. That's the lowest in many decades. So, but job growth and the need to train the workforce are central issues in this elections, top to bottom, U.S. Senate down to State Assembly. So talk about jobs, where they're occurring, and do the millennials want these jobs?
Well, there's a lot of questions in that question, Steve. I mean, where are the jobs? We have excellent job growth in this state. And I think the policies that have been put in place by Governor Walker, the Republican legislature, have really resulted in some very fertile ground for job growth and job creation. We have the Southeast Wisconsin area, which is really on the eve of an explosion of job growth. But then at the same time, we have northern Wisconsin, where we have plenty of jobs, We just don't have the people that either are able to fill those jobs or desire to fill those jobs. We have tourism attractions in northern Wisconsin that are thinking about closing down at least one day a week because they can't find enough people, as staff.
Right.
So we're having job growth, we're having job filling challenges, and then we also have the challenge, and we are, for the most part, while we're heavy in manufacturing and we've got some high tech going on in this state, we're an agriculture, forestry, tourism-based state in a lot of ways. In many of those areas, it's difficult to find our current population desirous enough of those jobs to fill them.
Let's be specific. You talk about manufacturing.
Yeah.
I think we might rank second only to Indiana.
I think we're first now.
First,
we just overtook Indiana.
I want to talk about the Fox Valley Corridor. Go up to Green Bay. You and I, when we drive that, we see all these now hiring signs. Why can't those viable manufacturing companies, largely manufacturing, fill those jobs? Is it a case of millennials not wanting it?
Well, let me twist that a little bit, Steve, and talk about it this way. Let me talk about it in terms of generational perspective.
Yeah.
When we were younger, when we were, let's call millennial age, let's say 18 to 25 or 30 or so, when we were that age, we actually believed, it was our mindset, that if you paid us enough money, we could be happy anywhere. We went to where there was a job, we worked it, we saved money, we went to where the job was.
Yeah.
It's not the same today. With this new generation of wealth makers, let's call them the millennials, which are, let's say, late 20s and 30s at this point. We actually have a generation Z right now, which is 18, 19, 20. But let's call the millennials the 20-somethings, 30-somethings. They're not going to where a job is. They are going to where life is attractive to them and finding a job once they get there. And because we have been so successful as baby boomers, many of them did that, but when they went somewhere to enjoy life and couldn't quite find the job that they desired or which was sufficient to fund their lifestyle, they came back and moved in with us. And we said, okay. I mean, when we were 18, we were given a graduation present for high school. It was called a suitcase, and we were told to use it. Our parents' job was done. It was time for us to move out. Not today. Today, the millennials, we as their parents, we want them to stay forever. And if they go out and take some adventure on and it's not successful, they come back and we welcome them. It's not better or worse. It's just different. So while baby boomers, when we were younger, we woke up, and even today, we wake up every morning and our number one goal for that day is to work. We are all about work. Who we are is what we do for a living. If we lined up 100 baby boomers and said to them, tell me about you, 99 of them are going to say, well, I work at WisconsinEye, or I work at the Wisconsin Counties Association, or I work in the manufacturing area, or I work for a telecom company. That's what they do is defined by who they are is defined by what they do. If we found 100 millennials, let's assume we could find 100 that were actually employed, and lined them up and said, tell me about you. It's going to be, well, I'd like to learn how to fly. I really like hiking. I'm going to canoe the Black River. I work at a major healthcare operation. It's number 6, 7, 8 in the list. They wake up every day, not to work. They wake up every day and go to work because they have something better to do later called life. So we have to ask then, what are these millennials interested in? They're interested in quality of life.
And are they leaving Wisconsin, Mark?
Yeah, they're leaving Wisconsin. I mean, they come back sometimes
drain.
later. That is, some people call it that. I think we could talk to the university. There's going to be some dispute about whether we really have a brain drain or not. Yeah. But clearly, we don't have enough smart young talent to fuel the industries, the jobs that we have now and we're going to have in the future. So we really need to ask ourselves, how is it we can create an environment where the smart young talent wants to be here?
That's a huge disconnect, isn't it? The jobs of the future and the unwillingness of millennials, largely millennials, to take those jobs because they have different values.
Well, let me give you an example, Steve. And what I would assert is not uniformly, but there are certainly lots of examples where we are legislating. We, baby boomer generation, we are legislating. We are creating an environment where we believe that the smart young talent of today thinks like we did when we were that age. Take as little money from me as possible, give me a job and I'll move to it. Well, the millennials today are saying, take as little money from me as possible. I don't have any money for you to take. So this is not a big, it's not a big plus to me. They're saying, give me things that I find attractive in life. Give me hiking, recreational, biking opportunities. Give me an opportunity to move about in an urban area without having a car. Give me continuing education, not even for a degree. Give me an attractive park system. Give me broadband everywhere I can possibly walk or get to. Give me those things. And when we look at that list, 80% of that list that is attractive to the smart young talent, the wealth makers of tomorrow, 80% are things that government funds. So if we want to create an attractive environment to bring in that smart young talent, which is the #1 fuel for our private sector, new millennium knowledge technology-based economy, then we need to invest in our communities to make them attractive. I mean, the economy, the number one, we're heavy public sector in this state. We got a substantial public sector. But if we're going to grow as a state, it is going to be because the private sector flourishes. So we have to ask ourselves, what is it the private sector needs to succeed? Well, they need available capital. They need money to risk and to invest and to grow. They need the resources. They need smart young talent. And the smart young talent, the fuel for our private sector in our new millennium knowledge technology-based economy, it's not water, it's not steel, it's not paper pulp. It is smart young talent. It is brain power. So we need to have as many of those, of that brain power, as much of that brain power as we can possibly get in this state. And we get it by investing in our communities and making them attractive to that smart talent.
When you and I got ready for this show, I wrote this down. Wisconsin's tax structure and our economy are not linked up. So for that reason, let's turn to one major way that local governments are financed. Let's talk about property taxes.
Well, okay, and let me explain the why.
Go ahead.
Let me explain why I say they're not linked up.
Wisconsin's tax structure and the economy are not linked up.
Not linked up. We have a disconnect. Here's why I would assert that. We have a new millennium knowledge technology-based economy, and we're applying a 1950s tax structure to it. And what do I mean in real words? If our economy is going to grow, and again, while we have a substantial public, it's really going to be the private sector. It is going to be, in large part, our service-based sector. And we're heavy manufacturing. We want to keep every manufacturing job we have, and we want to grow some more. But if we're going to grow, it is going to be because, in large part, our service and professional-based sectors are going to grow.
Private sector, not public sector.
Private sector. Yet our tax structure, and some very smart folks in the business community, good friends of mine, they would say, Mark, government coffers ought to grow only to the extent the economy grows. Now, there are definitely some flaws with that perspective, but let's just assume it's true for a moment. Government coffers ought to grow to the extent the economy grows. Okay, that means the government coffers and the economy need to be linked up. Yet, if our economy is going to grow, it is going to be in large part because of professional services. Let's unfairly categorize it. Yet, our tax structure taxes things you can touch and feel and drop on your foot. So here's a real life example. If I woke up this morning and went to a health club, I will pay no sales tax. If I if I go to a haircut this afternoon, obviously hypothetical, Steve, but if I get a haircut this afternoon, I'm not going to pay any sales tax. If I listen to a live band tonight, I'm not going to pay any sales tax. But if I stop at a local drugstore and pick up some over-the-counter cold medication for my daughter, I'm going to pay sales tax. I can touch and feel and drop that. I can't touch, feel, or drop my healthcare facility, my workout facility, or live band, or a haircut. Yet those are areas that are growing. And when we look at, so what I'm suggesting to you is that we have this 1950s tax structure being applied to our new millennium economy. So we either need to, I guess, go backwards in our economy to move it back to 1950s, not going to happen, nor should it, or update our tax structure to be applied to our new millennium knowledge technology-based economy. And
part of our 1950s tax structure, a big part, is the property tax, right? So let's show the graphic that says Wisconsin property taxes, 3.7% of personal income, and we rank, what do we rank? 15th.
Yeah.
15th in the nation. Now, when you talk about our property tax, here's a number from Fiscal Bureau. Last year, local governments levied $11 billion in gross property taxes.
Yeah.
When you subtract the property tax credits that you and I get on our home and the lottery and
Down to about 9 or so, a little over 9.
9.76 billion. So 11% of the gross levy is reduced by tax credits. So let's just lay the groundwork that way when we talk about property tax, which is 15th highest in the nation, taking 3.7% of personal income. But I want to pursue this because when you go deeper with the Fiscal Bureau, here's what they say. 11 billion in property tax, 45% or 4.9 billion goes to schools.
Schools, yep, K-12, yeah.
26% or 2.8 billion goes to the munis, cities, villages, and towns.
Yep.
And your counties collect 20%.
Yep.
Or 2.189.
Yes.
What's wrong with this picture?
Well, what's wrong with it is that we can go into the details of the numbers if you like, but what's really wrong with the picture is that we are very heavily reliant on the property tax to fund a local government. And as our demographics have changed, our taxing structure has not. And let me expand upon that. For a long time in this state and in many states across the country, we relied on the property tax to fund local government. And we assumed that a person had a certain level of wealth based upon how much property or the value of property that they acquired. You acquired property, a house,
Was that
land.
a 1950s theory?
It's been going on for decades and decades, and not just in Wisconsin, but everywhere. So we would value your wealth based on how much property you've acquired or the value of it. And then we would tax you with something called the property tax, which we would then take, we as a state generically, and fund a local government. It worked out pretty well for a long time because you had this underlying revenue stream called wages, which allowed you to pay the taxes on your perceived wealth based on how much property you acquired. But now, 6 years or so ago, something changed. Something happened. The first baby boomer retired. So the baby boomer, and let's take you as a generic example, you lost your underlying revenue stream called income or wages. But I, the government, I'm still valuing your wealth based on how much property you have or you've acquired. So, and in the past, while you were able to pay that tax, now you can't. So that's a less than technical explanation for we really are taxing you out of your home.
But wasn't the old unwritten premise the idea that when someone retired, the next generation would be able to buy their home at a higher price? Is that no longer the case?
Well, it wasn't the case for a few years after 2008.
Right, the big crash.
But if we continue along this, and so the question, I guess, would be, well, if we're going to buy your house at a higher price, then where is it?
Because I need that as a nest egg for retirement.
And where is it you are going to go? Arizona or Florida? I mean, in some cases, yes. But we're not allowing people that actually do want to stay in their homes the ability to do so, because we're taxing them out of their homes. Government needs a certain amount of dollars to provide the services and programs that our citizens demand / desire, and in the county's case, that the state asks us to perform. So while getting back to your statistics, while we are roughly, let's say, 19-20% of that property tax portion of the pie,
yes,
the vast majority of that is to carry out programs, functions, and services that our partners at the state believe our citizens should have or that the legislature desires them to have. And we are happy to do that. The partnership between the state and the counties is critical for our quality of life. The legislature, the governor, see a challenge in our state. They address it with a program or function, followed by legislation, and then an allocation of funds. So let's say we have a $100 problem. The legislature and the governor might provide us with, let's say, $70, $80, $90 to solve that $100 problem. And then we have to go to the property tax for $10, $20, or $30. And that can work if we have a population that is able to pay the property tax, and we at the local level are actually able to have a structure in place to get that property tax. But we didn't. We don't have that now.
But the heart of the property tax is the uniformity clause that real property in Wisconsin must be taxed uniformly. But the recent Department of Revenue equalized value statement shows big disparities in growth.
Yes.
I want to go to the stats that I have, and growth statewide in real property was 5% if you do not include personal property. Okay?
Yeah.
But growth in Taylor County 1%, growth in Kenosha County 8%, growth in the Milwaukee metro area in real property, again, not including personal property, 5% Milwaukee, 5% Racine, 5% Washington, 6% Ozaki, and then you have Iron County grew 1% with no new construction. So what do these examples prove?
I think it highlights
Excuse me.
a flaw in our current system. Let's take the Southeast, and there's a lot of things happening in Southeast Wisconsin, a lot of really good things, and things are happening. And so we have new construction. A person might say they're being rewarded by being able to generate more dollars that they can invest in the community and make it continually attractive to the smart young talent to fuel the growth. But what about other parts of the state? You said Iron, Taylor, you could go through a long list. And
Iron
if we went
County,
through
1% growth overall, no new construction, 0. No growth in commercial properties, residential properties in Iron County went up 2%. Excuse me.
So we could go through a whole long list, and you would find many of the rural counties in that same particular challenge. So
Residential properties statewide up 5%, excuse
So
me.
how are they? How would we, in our current system, one might ask, what opportunity do these counties have to succeed? What opportunity do they have to invest in their communities, to make them attractive, to actually get out of that 0 or 1% growth and into, let's say, a 5 or 6? And our current structure is not allowing for that to happen. We can't generate the dollars to invest to make them attractive.
Because of levy limits?
Levy limits is one part of it.
Levy limits ties it to new construction. So in
Yes.
Iron County, where there's no new construction, they're bound to the old limits. Excuse me.
I think maybe a productive conversation that we should have as a state is what is it we wish to occur? Do we want growth? Do we want opportunity? Do we want localities to be able to have the resources necessary to create the community they desire and grow on their own? Do we wish that? Or is our goal or desire, we have a property tax challenge, we're simply going to put a cap on it and that's it? There's nothing wrong with that particular challenge.
Yeah.
But if that's it, we've got a good system. But if the former is the case, we want to create an opportunity for localities all over this state to grow, then our current structure is not optimal to allow that to happen.
And this is a good time to look at Wisconsin's revenue mix. Let's talk about the current sources of revenue. Property tax, 24.2%, 12% nationally. Individual income, 18.4%, 14th. Sales, 13.7% of the total, 32nd. Other, 10.9%. Corporate income, 2.7% of all revenues. Are corporations paying their fair share?
Oh, there's a long debate about that, and really I think that kind of falls into sort of a finger pointing.
Okay.
Corporations, you should pay more. I'm not sure that that's really the argument we should be addressing.
Okay.
I think the argument we should be addressing is our tax mix proper, and I would suggest that it is not. We are heavy on income and property. We are relatively light on sales and fees and charges. We're very different than a lot of other states. If we were going to modify our tax structure entirely, we might look at, some have suggested maybe we should just get rid of the corporate income tax. Either fix it or get rid of it. And that's not, there's some good arguments as to why you might want to do that. Others would say we ought to increase the tax on corporations, and there are arguments there too. I think the bigger argument is we're too heavy on property and on income, but too light on sales and charges and fees. How would we modify that? Well, you might expand the basket of goods and services on which you apply the sales tax. You might provide a credit on everyone's income tax form to give them back a portion of the sales tax that they paid. And that way you could even it out and make it actually quite progressive. For a long time in this state, our sales tax was actually progressive. It wasn't until, in the past 20 years that it became slightly regressive, and now you could make an argument that it's regressive. But that could easily be fixed by transforming the sales tax to a consumption tax by providing a credit on the income tax and expanding the basket. We could expand the basket of goods and services on which you apply the sales tax, of 5%. You could reduce that to 3.5%
if you
on a larger basket.
Yes.
And if you did, then you would actually come closer to matching up our tax structure with our economy. Then, as the economy grew, so too would government coffers, which government then ought to use to invest in our communities to make them attractive to the smart young talent, the number one resource for private sector profit. That is actually sustainable.
Yes, and I'm glad you used the S word, because you have called the property tax not sustainable.
Yeah.
And as a result, Wisconsin, this is a question, Wisconsin will have to look at some of these different sources of revenue. What are other states doing to get out of this traditional sales and property tax?
Well, and we could look at different states. There's a variety. I mean, it runs the gamut. You might have a mineral-rich state, like let's say Texas. Well, okay, that's a different scenario altogether. You may have Florida, which is an entirely different operation as well. But let's talk generically. What is it we might do?
Yes.
Well, we might look at the mix. The trouble
broadening
is
the base of the sales
broadening
tax.
the base. The trouble is when you broaden that base, there are going to be political squabbles. Everyone has a stake in the game if you're going to apply a tax to an activity tomorrow that you're not applying today. Now, I don't think it's there are sectors of our economy, and let's take health clubs. I don't mean to generate a lot of health club mail toward me, but let's just take them as a generic example. If we were to apply a sales tax / consumption tax to health clubs, we're probably going to hear as a state, oh, you shouldn't tax me, health club. But we're not taxing the health club. We're simply asking them to collect from those that utilize the health club. And then we might also hear, well, it's going to put me in a difficult competitive environment. Well, not really, because if this health club is assessing a consumer 5%, so is the one next door and the one down the road. So those kinds of arguments are difficult. Some might also say, well, it's a tax because you weren't collecting it today, but you are collecting it tomorrow. We should have a good debate about that.
Is expanding the basket of goods and services on which Wisconsin charges the 5% state sales tax the single biggest change you think we should make to reduce our reliance on the property tax, which you've called not sustainable?
I think it's it may be the most palatable, immediate, with large impact change that we could make. What I'd really like to see, I'd like to see legislators, some business folks, demographers, I guess some social scientists, reporters, futurists, get together and talk about what it is our state ought to look like in 5, 10, 20, 50 years. I'd like to see that happen.
This is not a discussion that's now going on.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I'd like to see that occur. And then as we describe and paint the state we desire in 20 or 50 years, then let's talk about where we are today and what's in the way from where we are now to what it is we want to be. And then addressing those things that are in the way, and the tax structure is one of them.
Before we get to questions from the Facebook audience, here's my question.
Yeah.
You have mentioned expanding the basket on which a sales tax is charged.
Yep.
What's your second choice in terms of a progressive and more fair change in Wisconsin's tax structure?
Well, I do think we should look at providing locals with more authority over the environment or the community that they desire. And someone is listening on Facebook or watching this show later is going to say, oh, you're talking about getting rid of levy limits. Well, I guess in a way I am. Because I'm talking about allowing locals to invest in their communities to make them attractive so we can draw in the smart young talent so they're here to fuel the private sector so the private sector can do what it does best, employ people and create wealth. And we want that to occur. We want more people making more money, engaged in more commerce, paying more in taxes, even at lower rates with an expanded basket. I would want that. And one of the ways we get that done is allowing locals to invest in their communities to make them attractive. I would say this, Steve. The communities / states that see this, and we are not alone facing this demographics challenge, the ones that see this and position themselves to be attractive to the smart young talent in an economy where businesses can move almost overnight, and they will move to where the smart young talent is, their number one resource for profit. Those that get that, are going to be very well positioned in the future. And I would love for Wisconsin to be one of those places.
Okay, now let's go to questions from the Facebook audience. So
Sure.
and thank you for submitting them. And let's try to go through them pretty quickly. Are there specific regions in the state that have been successful in attracting millennials?
Yeah, there have been. Madison is probably one of the best example. Now, we are an anomaly in this state, but we're a pretty good example. And Milwaukee is actually pretty good at this. Fox Valley a bit.
Dane County equalized values are now higher than Milwaukee County.
That's a major.
Go ahead.
It's a watermark that's been passed.
Yes.
Milwaukee is pretty good. The Fox Valley, Green Bay area, and Chippewa Valley area. Those areas are better than other parts of the state in attracting those millennials. But
then what have they done right in those regions?
well, think about what they've done. They have invested in their communities to the extent that they could or can, not without some challenges, but they have been able to do that. And think about those communities as well. Where are they located? Right in the center of a heart of transportation, major transportation routes.
Right.
Not a surprise there, but like, for example, Chippewa Valley, Eau Claire area, they have done some really interesting things. They are creating sort of an arts district feel to the operation.
Yes.
It's an attractive place for smart young talent, and businesses are seeing that, so they are locating there or at least contemplating it.
Second question. Comes from a viewer. It's not
Yeah,
mine.
sure.
How does Foxconn play into this discussion?
Foxconn is going to happen. It's happening now. We're going vertical now in some of the buildings. So I don't know what's behind the question, whether it's good or whether it's bad. Quite frankly, it doesn't matter that debate is over. We are going to have Foxconn. So since we are going to have that, how do we make Foxconn a great corporate citizen of our state? And they see that. That's why they're providing $100 million of research to Madison, opening an office in Green Bay, another, I think, was it Eau Claire? I can't remember. I think it's Eau Claire. Another office in Eau Claire.
Innovation centers in Green Bay and Eau Claire.
Okay, innovation centers. So how does it factor into it? Foxconn is, I guess, generating a lot of economic activity, or going to, and certainly going to be a draw on the number of smart young talent that we have in this state. In fact, it's a good example of how we are going to have to draw in more smart young talent. I shouldn't say just young, smart talent into this state to fuel that. And maybe we should get into that at some point too, Steve, the link between per capita income and education level of our population. But let's go to the questions and maybe it'll touch upon it.
Now, I said that of the $11 billion in property tax levy, counties get 19.9%.
Yes.
Counties and local governments also get shared revenue. So here's the question. Is shared revenue still the best way to equalize state tax revenue and help keep property taxes down, or should we figure out something new? Shared revenue has been frozen for how many years?
Oh, many years.
Here's a softball. Hit it out of the park. How many?
I'd have to look back. It's been a long time.
Okay, so that's frozen.
It is. Shared revenue, and the cities benefit to a much greater extent than counties in terms of shared revenue.
Okay.
But is it the best way to equalize? It's probably not the best way, certainly when you don't apply the formula and update it and continue to add to it. Are there other ways? Well, certainly. I mean, counties, we generate a little shy of $200 million a year in shared revenue. We've got, if we added it up, I don't know, maybe $1 billion worth of activities we do on behalf of the state where we're putting property tax into it. Mm-hmm. So it pales in comparison. It's just another way for the state to partially fund the things it asks counties to do. Cities are a little bit different story. They don't have the same list of required functions to perform that the state asks counties to do. So they might utilize shared revenue to make their communities attractive. If as a state, never mind if we can set aside the pressure of not enough dollars, would we as a state really say to our local units of government, our municipalities, we're going to give you additional dollars that we might generate in other parts of the state so that you have a greater opportunity to succeed? Absolutely. That would be one way we might even out a 6 or 8% growth area with a 1% or 0% growth area. So is it a useful mechanism? Yes. Should we keep it? Yes. Should it be modified? Absolutely. Either with increased dollars or applying a formula to create that opportunity in other areas that don't necessarily have it now.
Final question from one of our viewers. Best steps our state needs to take to retain its best and brightest as they graduate from high school and/or college.
Oh yeah, I love that question. Best steps: make our state an attractive place to be. How would we do that? Let's see. Continuing education, more doors to higher education, more wide open in more places, at as reasonable a cost as we can possibly do it. And there's lots of ideas on how we might do that. Create a financial incentive, not initially, but later in life in terms of how you fund your school. For example, I guess not example, but here's a thought, Steve. Right now, we ask young people to give us money for their higher education. At the very time of their life, they have none. So the system it's odd. Why would we not look at options to this system? Why wouldn't we say this? If you would like higher education, Steve Walters, young 18-year-old, you can come to my institution and pay me money, and I will give it to you, and then you can go consume it and do whatever you wish. And maybe we'll see you in Wisconsin, maybe not. I'd like to, but maybe not. But what if you said to me, but Mark, I don't have any money, but I do want a higher education? I would say, okay, I'll tell you what, I'll strike a deal with you. I will give you higher education, and then you give me a percentage of your income when you are, let's say, 30 to 45, when you're actually making some money, in exchange for it, and maybe a little higher amount when you're 45 to 65, when you're really making money. How about that? And then we have more people saying, sure, I'll do that. I mean, why would we want to do that? Because there's a direct correlation between the education level of a population and per capita income. The more highly educated the population, the higher the per capita income. The higher the per capita income, with whatever income tax you're going to apply to it, the more dollars you might generate, and the more dollars an individual will have to engage in economic activity and commerce. So we apply a sales tax. So we want more people making more money, engaged in more commerce, and one way you do it is by getting them more education. In our state, we are below Minnesota by roughly 5 or 6 percentage points. We're below the U.S. average by, I think, a little over 1 percentage point. We're at like 27.9 or so. The national average is about 29. Minnesota's up in the low 30s. We ought to want this. So we would do that. We would at the same time create an environment so we have the attractiveness of that the millennials desire. For example, if we could, and I know that the governor's working on this, the legislature's been working on this, try to keep a young millennial, a 25-year-old, in an area that doesn't have broadband. Or even when you go to a coffee shop, if you have one in your small town,
they're out of there.
It's limited even then. Try to keep them. That's one of the reasons we have townships in our state that have an average age of over age 55. Yeah. That's what we would do.
Now,
that's a couple things.
You and I are Capitol veterans. We've been watching that Capitol for decades. Here's my question. Is there a growing political will in the Capitol to address some of these very, very tough questions?
Oh, I think so. Let's say growing, that's a good question. Is there an understanding by some Capitol leaders? Absolutely. I do recall it was a few years ago. I was at a local establishment with the late Mike Ellis. Good friend of mine, admired Mike for a long, long time, very bombastic, and he would tell you what he thought.
Oh, yes.
And if he didn't like what you didn't agree with you, you would know it.
How true.
So I laid all of this out for him years ago, and he said, I absolutely 100% agree. I agree 100% with what you're saying. It's just that we don't have the political will to do it. A few, but not enough. Do legislators see it? I think a good number do. I think Speaker Voss has been a leader on visionary thinking, so he would definitely see this. But this is politically risky, which is why it's so difficult to try to make a move like this. That's why legislation and public policy moves in, relatively speaking, incremental
These are
stages.
not soundband changes.
Oh no, these are major changes to position our state for future success.
One more question, and then we've got to wind down here. How critical in all these things that we've been talking about is transportation investment? Now, you've heard the governor say, in 8 years I've been governor, we've invested $24 billion. So I don't want you to get in any political debate. But over the next 8 years, whoever is governor, do we need to dramatically increase that to $27, $30 billion? Talk about the linkage with between our state's future and transportation funding?
Well, the numbers in the maps are very clear. Where you have major transportation routes, that is where economic activity is occurring. So if we want economic activity in areas that don't have it now, we would want to improve or expand the transportation infrastructure that they have. There is no question about it. The governor and legislature have provided local units of government with substantial funding over the past couple of years. But we're only one part of the system. There's a much larger part of the system. I mean, and we're a big, important part, but we're not the largest part. The largest part, I mean, our interstate system is only going to last so long. I mean, right now we're actually, past its useful life in many areas.
In many sections.
So will it take substantial investment in transportation? Absolutely, absolutely, and not just surface transportation. We're talking our harbors and our airports, and if we want to be that economic mecca, if we want to be that, the next Silicon Valley and the Midwest diamond, if we want to be that, one absolute necessary ingredient is infrastructure, and one of the primary, top of the list on infrastructure is transportation. I guess second on the list would be soft infrastructure like broadband. I mean, if I had the magic wand and the number of dollars was not a limiting factor, I would say 1 and 2, transportation infrastructure, we are going to be the envy of the country, of the world. Secondly, anywhere you walk within the borders of this state, you will have high-speed broadband. Absolutely. So businesses, you would like to come to Marinette, we've got you covered. Absolutely. We have people in Butternut, village of Butternut in Ashland County. Yep. Your young people want to take French. We have the best French teacher in the country working at Sheboygan Falls. We're gonna pipe you in every Tuesday at 9 o'clock so you can have French. We would broadband everywhere and transportation and hard surface infrastructure everywhere.
Fascinating discussion. I want to end it this way because we're running out of time. What's at stake if we don't begin to have some of these serious discussions? What's at stake in Wisconsin 10 years from now? What do we look like as a state?
Well, that's a good question, because we are moving ahead so rapidly in some areas in a really good way. I mean, our unemployment is incredibly low. The people we are able to keep here, our children, they're smart. I mean, they're really smart.
But you added the caveat that we are able to keep here. Excuse me.
That's right, and we have opportunities for them. But I think what we need to address is that the wealth makers of tomorrow don't necessarily think like the wealth makers of yesterday, us. So we need to tap into it. So if we don't, what is it we look like? Well, I think we have challenges in filling the jobs that we have. I think we have continued infrastructure challenges, which lead to not attracting that smart young talent. We run the risk of other areas of the country, states/communities, getting it before we do and becoming attractive and then drawing from us. We run that risk. I mean, a couple things will never change. We've got the most beautiful state in the country. We got the nicest people in the nation. We've got an incredible work ethic. Those things aren't going to change. That is within our DNA as Wisconsinites. That's not going to change. What is going to change is what opportunities we have, where, how, and how we take advantage of them. That's what could change.
And the potential disparity between the thriving parts of this state, southeast Wisconsin and the Fox Valley, and rural, this is a disparity that could grow unless we have some of these serious discussions.
I would say if you were going to use the words haves and have-nots, if we continue along our current path and we have continuing aging in our rural areas with lack of economic activity and lack of our ability to invest in our communities to make them attractive, then the haves and the have-nots, the lines continue to separate on a graph.
Yeah,
and that's problematic.
As long as you've been in the Capitol, you're a hopeful guy, right? We can get some of this right?
Well, I've had conversations with so many legislators, and we have legislators that care an awful lot. They really do. Do we agree on exactly how we ought to go? Do they all agree on what direction we ought to take and how we ought to get there? Clearly not. But am I hopeful? Absolutely. It is the Wisconsin way to be hopeful, to be visionary, to believe that we can position our state for future success and that we can be the best. That is the way we think.
Mark O'Connell, Executive Director of the Wisconsin Counties Association, and he's asking the questions that Wisconsin needs to ask and answer. Mark, thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.